I spent a lot of time this summer by a beautiful tidal river, a magical place of my childhood where I learned to sail, Burnham-on-Crouch in Essex on the east coast of England. As well as a habitat for gulls, gannets, cormorants, and kittiwakes, seals, crabs, and other saltwater creatures, the River Crouch hosts many boats of all shapes and sizes that bob up and down on their buoys, or buoys as you might pronounce it, changing their orientation upriver and then downriver as the tide swings them around on their moorings. This river punctuates time with its tidal rhythm. High water, low water, 6-hour cycles, flowing and ebbing, expanding and contracting, holding and pausing. There is something profound and wonderful about watching these rising and falling tides as a way of observing time. The seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years are going way faster than any of us would care to admit. Right? And as we begin a new year on the Jewish calendar, I've been reflecting a lot about time in all of its complexity, mystery, confusion. We've just ended not only another Jewish year, but a Shemitah year, the 7th sabbatical year in the cycle, a year in which we let the land rest and we reflect on our relationship to the earth, to work, to play, and to time itself. What does it mean to leave one year behind and to start another? How do we mark time? How do we celebrate time, honor time? We get caught in an illusion that we can control time, but really, time controls us. Wasting time, spending time, saving time, gaining time, losing time, taking time, giving time, making time, carving out time, passing time, killing time, cutting time, winning time, filling time, buying time, counting time, burning time. These are just some of the verbs that we use to describe our relationship with time. Yes, we feel a sense of urgency in our lives with so much to do and the pressing need to be efficient and productive and useful with the time that we have. Yet that can be a trap as we make ourselves more and more busy. Personally, I regret the frequency of saying, I would love to do that, but I'm busy. I don't have time, knowing that it's not about having time, but about making the time. And knowing that hours and hours can pass by without me really knowing what it is I've done. I recently read a book. I read a book. A book that was published last year called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, by the British author who now lives in New York, Oliver Burkeman. It's both an alarming and a deeply comforting read, putting a lot into perspective and powerfully challenging some of the traditional concepts of time management. The title, I didn't know that time management was funny. The title comes from the shocking reality that an average human lifespan is 4,000 weeks. That's it. If you're lucky and live until 90, you get almost 4,700 weeks. The Queen, whose recent passing moved me more than I imagined it would, lived for just under 5,000 weeks. Florence Lavin, who's is mourned deeply by her daughter Francine, who just died last week, got just under 5,200 weeks at 99 years old. Ultimately, this book is a deep invitation to accept and embrace our finitude and let go of the conceit that we are limitless in what we can achieve and how we can impact and save the world. None of us was born into the royal family, right? And very few of us are going to have an earth-shattering impact on history. Although some Hasidic sources urge us to remember that we are actually all descendants of King David. So actually we are all royalty. But either way, we all inhabit our finite spheres with our unique slice of time and space and influence. I, like so many of you, experience such anxiety about how I am using my time and what I am achieving. Oliver Berkman says in the book that I read, he says, when you're faced with too many demands, it's easy to assume that the only answer must be to make better use of time by becoming more efficient, driving yourself harder, or working longer. Soon your sense of self-worth gets completely bound up with how you're using time. It stops being merely the water in which you swim and turns into something you feel you need to dominate or control if you're to avoid feeling guilty, panicked, or overwhelmed. I can see some knowing looks of acknowledgement of that. A bit later in the book he says, but ultimately it backfires. It wrenches us out of the present, leading us to a life spent leaning into the future, worrying about whether things will work out, experiencing everything in terms of some later hoped-for benefit, so that peace of mind never quite arrives. The trouble with attempting to master your time, he says, it turns out, is that time ends up mastering you. It's not an original religious or spiritual idea to embrace what is and to live in the moment, the power of now, as Eckhart Tolle would have it. But there is something about relinquishing ourselves of the notion that we have finite, limitless possibilities that is really important. As Berkman puts it, rather than face our limitations, we engage in avoidance strategies in an effort to carry on feeling limitless. And he also says it's only by facing our finitude that we can step into a truly authentic relationship with life. We recently experienced the sad and sudden loss of Bill Nagel, husband of Joni, at 72 years old. In the eulogy for this remarkable, kind man, I quoted Abraham Lincoln, who said, "And in the end, it is not the years in your life that count. It's the life in your years." And there's a verse in Psalms, in Psalm 90, that says, "Limnot yameinu ken hoda v'navi levav chokhmah." Teach us to count our days rightly so that we may obtain a wise heart. These two quotes from Abe Lincoln and the psalmist point towards the whole idea of making our days count rather than counting our days. Of course, we have to think of the future and the impact our choices in the present are having on the future, with the most obvious example being our carbon footprint with the increasing manifestations of our changing climate and devastating extreme weather events. Professor William McCaskill of Oxford University calls this long-termism, making choices with awareness of their impact on future generations, which is crucial. Kind of like the seventh generation principle based on an ancient Iroquois philosophy, that the decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future, more than a brand of toilet paper and washing up liquid. There are so many people in this community who are indeed working very, very deeply and tirelessly and devotedly for our future, whether people who serve on our green team headed by Farmer Becker or our new building committee thinking about our future headed by Bruce Wildman and Jeff Gunn-Levy. And everyone's giving so much thought and energy and, yes, time to these projects. However, if we constantly live in regret for the past and anxiety at the uncertainty of the future, we are, of course, not living in the present. And untapped, this sense of urgency many of us can feel, make us rush our way through life, too busy to be aware, distracted and multitasking and incredibly impatient and even intolerant. Our addiction to our devices, of course, doesn't help with this. My dog Baruch, however, keeps me very much in the here and now when I'm in a hurry with his sniffs and taste and chasing of every rabbit and squirrel in the present moment. In the Torah passage from Deuteronomy chapter 11, that became the second paragraph of the Shema, amidst the complex theology of cause and effect and the power of consequences, there is a verse that says, or a phrase that says, V'avadatem mehera, part of a warning that literally means, and you will be quickly destroyed. Our beloved teacher, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, wrote an English prayer book called Shema, a concise weekday siddur for praying. And he translates that phrase brilliantly and audaciously as, your rushing will destroy you. Your rushing will destroy you. In our terror of embracing what is, we hastily and clumsily stampede our way through life, causing devastation. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who, by the way, was knighted by the Queen in 2005, leading to the possible statement that the Queen said, "Why is this night different to all other nights?" Rabbi Sacks wrote in an essay on the Parsha from a couple of weeks ago, Ki Tetzei, he said, "Never be in too much of a rush to stop and come to the aid of someone in need of help. Rarely, if ever, will you better invest your time. It may take a moment, but its effect may last a lifetime." Or in Oliver Burkeman's words, the more you hurry, the more frustrating it is to encounter tasks, or toddlers, he's a father of toddlers, that won't be hurried. The more compulsively you plan for the future, the more anxious you feel about any remaining uncertainties, of which there will always be plenty, and the more individual sovereignty you achieve over your time, the lonelier you get. And he says, working too hastily means you'll make more errors, which you'll then be obliged to go back to correct. Hurrying a toddler to get dressed in order to leave the house is all but guaranteed to make the process last much longer. Tolstoy, in War and Peace, said, "The two most powerful warriors are patience and time." Our culture has demanded instant gratification, immediate results, and a brutal lack of patience that often manifests in very careless and unkind treatment of others. It has been calculated, apparently, that if Amazon's front page, the home page, loaded 1 second more slowly, it would cost the company, wait for it, $1.6 billion a year in profits. If their home page loaded 1 second slower. That's the world we live in. There was a recent interview with NPR's Scott Simon talking with Alexandra Reeve-Givens, who's the president of the Center for Democracy and Technology, about employers monitoring their employees and using technology to check exactly how employees are using their time. The interviewee said, "I remember reading one story about a company that marketed a suite of technology that was basically designed to generate a time card every 10 minutes. Generate a time card every 10 minutes. And it would capture what the employee was doing at exactly that point. And one of their workers gave an interview saying that he had to time his bathroom breaks. Such an absurd and disturbing example of how far we have gone in the attempt to reach efficiency and productivity. It's very sinister to think of, rather than us watching the clock is watching us. The 20th century Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai wrote a poem that challenges the classic text from Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, made famous by the bird song, "Turn, turn, turn," and the basis of that beautiful prayer for our community written by Rosalie that we just read. The passage that we're going to read during Sukkot begins L'chol zman ve'eit, l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. Amichai's poem, which is called Adam b'chayav, a man or a person in their life, begins, Adam b'chayav ein lo zman sheyihyeh lo zman lakol. A person in their life doesn't have time in their life to have time for everything. The poem continues, a person doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose. Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A person needs to love and to hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands, to throw stones and to gather them, to make love in war and war in love, and to hate and forgive and remember and forget, to arrange and confuse, to eat and to digest what history takes years and years to do. A person doesn't have time. When they lose, they seek. When they find, they forget. When they forget, they love. When they love, they begin to forget. And the poem concludes, they die as figs in the autumn, shriveled and full of themselves and sweet, the leaves growing dry on the ground, the bare branches pointing to the place where there's time for everything. I love the idea, and I think many of us experience the truth of this, that love, hate, laughing, and crying happen in the same moment with the same eyes and mouths. The original biblical text from Kohelet certainly is an acknowledgement of mortality and finitude. But Yehuda Amichai, who was born in Germany and a fighter in Israel's wars and a witness to the pain and the joy of the Jewish state, poignantly brings the perspective that we do not have the luxury to compartmentalize our time. Living in present time is to embrace what is with fortitude and with patience. I'm also very fascinated and intrigued by the idea that this time continuum might not be the only one, and that perhaps there are different versions of me living different lives in different universes. The multiverse concept has captured our imagination with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and Evelyn Wong, the discontented Chinese-American woman who moves from lives in different universes in the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. Some of you seen that movie? Kabbalah and other mystical ideas entertain the notion of different worlds and different realities, and perhaps some of us do indeed move in and out of lives lived and unlived in other dimensions. But I think this is a distraction from the central idea of the finitude of our lives and our time. I just wanted an excuse to mention those two cool movies. On one hand, though, in those inevitable moments when we feel unfulfilled in our life's potential and the wasting of time, we can be comforted by the abstract possibility that we are living full and happy lives in other realms. The recurring question to Dr. Stephen Strange across the multiverse is, are you happy, Stephen? It can be equally comforting, however, to accept that we are mortal, limited, finite beings, that we are doing our best in our imperfect and flawed way, and that we are not superheroes tasked with the impossible mission of saving the world. To quote Oliver Berkman again, you breathe a sigh of relief. And as you dive into life as it really is, in clear-eyed awareness of your limitations, you begin to acquire what has become the least fashionable and perhaps most consequential of all superpowers: patience. And the beautiful and harsh truth is that in the ultimate arc of history, the universe doesn't really care how we use or don't use our time, as we are kind of irrelevant and insignificant. Berkman has coined a fantastic phrase: cosmic insignificance therapy. This is what he says about it. Cosmic insignificance therapy is an invitation to face the truth about your irrelevance in the grand scheme of things, to embrace it to whatever extent you can, dropping back from the godlike fantasies of cosmic significance into the experience of life as it concretely, finitely, and often enough, marvelously, really is. So like the classic Jewish story attributed to the Polish Hasidic Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshiska, the story that every coat should have 2 pockets with a note in each one of which says, Bishvili nivra haolam, for my sake the world was created, and in the other, Ani afa ve'efer, I am but dust and ashes. Hence, we can be a time-traveling superhero in the multiverse, or we can embrace our total insignificance. Both can be useful, but I'm actually compelled by the latter and the relief it brings to the relentless pressure of achieving my goals. Time, 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 time. We can make time sacred too. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel famously observes in his beautiful poetic book, The Sabbath, that the root of kadosh, holy or sacred, is used in the Torah for the first time, not in reference to a place, not in reference to a person, but in reference to a time, a day, Shabbat, Shabbos. We mark this every week. We mark the new moons every month and the incredible cycles of holidays we have on our Jewish calendar, with the notion that we do not control time, but we let it, in its cycles, like the tides, control us and invite us into a special rhythm of celebration, commemoration, joy, feasting, and presence. The Catholic mystic Richard Rohr talks of living in deep time, and Berkman refers to the philosopher Kiran Setia's notion of atelic time, which is activity whose meaning and value isn't derived from its telos or its ultimate aim, but the only reason to do them is simply for themselves alone. There's no more to going for a walk than what you are doing right now. Not the future goal of summiting yet another 14er, but being present on the hike for its own sake, or lishma, as we might say in Hebrew. In Jewish tradition, the optimum mode of studying Torah is lishma, for its own sake. And many of the mitzvot, including hearing the shofar or gazing into the Hanukkah candles, are lishma, for their own sake too. We easily dismiss anything that does not have an ultimate goal or objective as a waste of time in a world where there is too much to do. But as John Lennon said, time you enjoy wasted isn't wasted. Or rather, time you enjoy wasted was not time wasted. Reb Zalman, in his book Jewish with Feeling, makes a distinction between commodity time and organic time, which he defines as sacred and living more in tune with your deeper needs rather than the demands of efficiency and the taskmaster time, as he puts it. Daily prayer, meditation, or other spiritual practices could be seen as a waste of time. I don't have time for that. My life is too busy. We can get caught in thinking that prayer is really about the outcome, the answer, the goal, and the object of our prayer request. But prayer, really, it's also lishma. It's for its own sake. It's atelic. It's daily and weekly moments of connecting to organic time. Kabbalists see Shabbat as a time beyond time. Time beyond time. Entering into the eternal, divine, transcendent time, a kind of multiverse. We can dismiss these as a waste of our precious time, or these experiences may actually be what save us. The bare branches pointing to the place where there's time for everything. That haunting last line of Yehuda Amichai's poem. He's talking about death, but it could also be the realm of organic, deep, timeless time. So this isn't about abrogating our responsibilities. It's not about denying the importance and the urgency of what needs to be done in the world, and there is so much. I often think of the sweet Sol Kimmerling, who died just a few months ago right in this neighborhood, who in the last week of his life was singing over and over again the line from Hillel's teaching from Pirkei Avot. Ve'im lo achshav emasai, ve'im lo achshav emasai, ve'im lo achshav emasai, emasai. And if not now, when? If not now, when? If not now, when? If not now can certainly be seen as a call for immediate action. But the paradox of it is that our obsession with productivity and getting it all done now can be counterproductive. And we might actually need to slow down rather than speed up in that attempt to embrace our finitude and to be fully in this moment. To see time as something to share rather than something to hoard. To celebrate these holy and sacred times with family and community. And to let go of the grandiosity that the world cannot exist without me. Jorge Luis Borges writes, "Time is a river that sweeps me along, but I am the river. It is a tiger which destroys me, but I am the tiger. It is a fire which consumes me, but I am the fire. I am the river. I am the tiger. I am the fire." So let's begin this new year by reevaluating how we see and how we live in time. Living more mindfully, more kindly, more gently. Slowing down when we need to slow down and speeding up when we need to speed up. Making the days count rather than counting the days. And letting go of the illusion that I am in control of the mystery of time. The tide will rise and the tide will fall. It will be slack and it will be racing and strong. Shana Tova.